Welcome to the Mini Break, your daily podcast for the biggest storylines, results, and controversies from the tennis world. Today is Saturday, June 29th. We are inching closer and closer to the start of the year's third major. The 2024 Wimbledon Championships are upon us. We are so close to the start of action, in fact, that we now have draws to analyze. That is precisely what we want to do for you on today's show. We want to run you all through all four quarters, of both the men's and women's singles draws. We want to talk through our favorite first round matches, talk through the sleepers in the draw, and then, of course, offer our predictions for how we see these Wimbledon Championships unfolding. I could think of no better person to help me do that live here on our Crack Racquets YouTube channel than the man who joins me on the show today. Of course, you all know him best as a returning champion here on this podcast, essentially the co-host of the Mini Break podcast show. Of course, he is the lead editor for allthingstennis.com, DKTNNS on Twitter. It is our dear friend David Kane joining us once again. DK, welcome back to the podcast. Are you ready for the 2024 Wimbledon Championships to begin?
First of all, shout out to that intro. I feel like we were really missing like a Sports Center musical sting on like it was. I hope our takes stand up to the intro because I really feel like we've set a very high bar thanks to our very own Daniel Westhoff. But I'm very excited. I feel like Wimbledon has kind of snuck up on us because I feel like for about a week and a half I was in that sort of post Roland Garros malaise to borrow a French term, and now I feel like the grass season really just sped up towards Wimbledon. And now I feel like we're going to really hit the ground running for the next 2 weeks with no interruption in the wake of our lack of a middle Sunday, which I kind of feel like I may be needing in about a week's time.
No, I mean, to your point, it also felt like the run of stories we got after the French Open were very much Olympic-centric, more so than Wimbledon-centric, and part of that had to do with the Olympics returning, of course, to Roland Garros for the tennis competition. But yeah, for the record, we can't hear it in our headphones. There actually is intro music. You'll have to go back and watch it because I promise you will enjoy it, David Kane. And yeah, again, we're trying to do more live content here on our Crack Racquets YouTube channel. Part of the reason for that is we want to interact with all of you tennis fans throughout the course of today's show. If you have any questions about these Wimbledon draws, have any takes you'd like to share with us, feel free to fire them off in the YouTube chat. We've already got a couple comments so far, both of them compliments of you, DK. I think your wardrobe selection has been complimented as well. So again, always nice to see some compliments here at the start. I'm sure we'll get some comments disagreeing with us as we go. But I guess before we get too deep into the nuance, we've talked contenders already on this show. We've talked about, again, some of the sleepers, some of the players who are closest to capturing a first major title. Big picture, 30,000 foot view. You feeling a chaotic Wimbledon ahead, or do you think this will be one where, dare I say, seeds stay the course?
Well, I mean, not to totally spoil my picks for the women's and men's side, respectively, but I do think I'm feeling a bit of chaos on the women's side, and I'm feeling a bit of stability on the men's side. I feel like we're going to get, I think it says something about the stability of the men's side that the quote unquote dark horse wild card wrench in the mix will be Novak Djokovic, who is, a 1 zillion time Grand Slam champion, but he really seems to factor in the most in terms of who will be the biggest surprise, perhaps, and that's a testament to the consistency of your Jannik Sinners, your Carlos Alcarazes, the way that the top of the men's game has really coalesced, and the way that it seems very likely we're going to see quite a bit of interesting matchups between top 10 players in the second half of the men's draw. I mean, conversely, you have a sort of interesting mix of trending up dark horses with perhaps question mark top seeds. You have your Iga Swiatek, who has never been her most comfortable on grass, who did not play a warm-up. You have an Arina Sabalenka admitting that she's feeling a bit of an injury in her shoulder, and Elena Rybakina, who has not necessarily brought her best tennis to the slams this year, which then creates ample opportunity for your trademark contenders and dark horses who have made a name for themselves over the last couple of weeks in this grass court warm-up swing. How important will that warm-up swing be for them compared to the men? And so that's really, I think we're going to get a little bit of everything. If you like everything, you're going to get it.
I think that's really well said. I agree with you. I think we would have projected similar stability on the women's side if two different things had happened. One, had we seen Iga Swiatek play at all during this grass court season? It's not that we aren't confident in her level on grass courts, and we'll certainly debate our degree of confidence throughout the course of today's show. But, again, the last time we saw her, she lost not her best quarterfinal match to Svitolina at Wimbledon last year. And look, the trend lines are all up for Swiatek on grass court. She has continued to get better over the course of her career, but we still need to see it play out, right? We need to see her make a deep run, but more than anything, look comfortable in making a deep run at Wimbledon. So it's the only event left where there's any sort of lingering doubt about the level Iga Swiatek will bring match in, match out. The other thing, you mentioned it as well, if Sabalenka was healthy, like it feels like this should be an event where she thrives with her power tennis. But, you know, we saw her retire down 5-1 in her match a couple of weeks ago. She talked openly in the press, some doubt for her going into round number 1 as well. In a year when we've talked consolidation at the top of the women's game, that was one of our big discussion points at the halfway mark. You're right. There is uncertainty going into this, and it's a stat I've pointed out all week long in previewing this major, but one I want to point out one more time. We have had at least one first-time major champion in every women's season since 2015. Wimbledon, U.S. Open, 2 more chances left because, of course, Sabalenka and Swiatek hogged the first 2 titles. This feels like the one where it would happen. Like, this feels like the opportunity. This feels like the moment. And so that lingers in the background on one hand. On the men's side, it's the stat I've also been turning to. Since 2004, only once have multiple first-time major champions emerged in the same year on the men's side. The last time that happened, of course, 2014, when Cilic and Wawrinka won their first titles, respectively. Sinner already won a first title in Australia. Do you really think someone else is going to capture their first at Wimbledon, given the doubts about Zverev on this surface? Yeah, Medvedev's made a semifinal. Hasn't looked that good of late overall. Obviously, guys like Ruud has never had a preference for this surface. Tsitsipas, I need to see him make a quarterfinal before I talk final. Like, you're right. On the men's side, this does not feel like the slam where something magical might happen. That said, Hubie is playing well. You know, Sinner, Alcaraz have still played fewer than 50 total grass court matches in their career. Like, those would be the big headline bullet points I would turn to as I look big picture heading into Wimbledon.
Yeah, I think grass, more than any other surface right now, is a surface that's going to reward experience and comfort on the surface. And I think right now the top of the women's game doesn't have the same depth of experience in the same way that the top men, and even if you say that, you know, a Sinner and Alcaraz don't have a ton of experience, they still have experience where it counts, winning slams. Alcaraz, the defending champion. You know, it's quality experience over quantity experience.
And Sinner just quickly has made quarters and semis the last 2 years. So it's not like he's been bad. His 2 losses were to Djokovic. Like, it's not like he's been bad.
We're not seeing a ton of natural grass. I think because of and I think this year more than other years, we're dealing with, you know, that perhaps push and pull of how hard do I throw myself into this grass court swing if I fancy myself a chance of winning an Olympic medal. You know, I mean, you know, especially for an Iga Swiatek who, you know, by all rights should walk away with the gold medal in Paris in a couple of weeks. Does she, you know, train too hard on the grass, or does she kind of, you know, this is an opportunity to win another slam? Absolutely, an opportunity to win to become the 8th woman to win the Channel Slam. Courtesy of our Pete Bodo, who wrote a story on Iga and the Channel Slam last week on tennis.com. But it's, you know, do you risk injury? Do you risk, you know, totally changing your game and having to then readjust back to clay? But players have talked about that grass clay adjustment as being particularly tricky, and so we will see how that bears out. But either way, we're going to see some really interesting matches. I'm quite sure of it.
Absolutely. And with that said, let's get into those matches. Again, what we want to do on today's show is run you through every quarter of both the women's and men's singles draws, offer our predictions, talk through the best first round matches, talk about where things might get funky. Again, get into everything we expect to unfold. Let's start on the women's side. And again, a shout out as always to our super producer, Daniel Westoff, who has graphics available for us here on YouTube. Thus, anyone listening to the podcast, you're really going to come check out the show live. It's just that much better and will be moving forward. We'll start at the top of the draw, the Iga Swiatek section of the draw. Now, look, Iga fans are one of my favorite groups because they are so vocal about everything. That passion just bleeds through every tweet. They were vocal about the draw Swiatek was dealt as we look at her top quarter, and certainly it's not a breeze through section. There are obstacles for the world number 1 as she tries to reach a first semifinal at the pro level at Wimbledon. Always like pointing out Wimbledon girls singles title champion Iga Swiatek. It starts right at the top. Sonia Kenin came to Wimbledon last year and beat Coco Gauff round number 1. She is a former major champion, Has she played her best tennis this season? No one would answer that question yes, but certainly not an easy draw given the other 126 options that perhaps were available to her. Even in that immediate section, you see names like Kerber. Putintseva won a title a couple of weeks ago. Siniakova, yeah, she had to retire last week, but she's hovering around a career high, and someone with her weapons can make you really uncomfortable in that on this surface. Obviously looking beyond that, just to a potential round of 16 players with weapons like Garcia, Ostapenko, who has already beaten Iga Swiatek at a major before. Let's just start here with the immediate Swiatek section. What's your level of concern for the world number one?
As I think we've discussed in the past, I am at times loath to make comparisons to Serena Williams, but I do think one of these comparisons with Serena, or a similarity that jumps out to me, is the fact that I think if you're the field playing Iga Swiatek, you are best served by knocking Iga out as early as possible. I think by the time Iga gets into the quarterfinals, semifinals of these slams, she's becoming increasingly, if not impossible, to beat. So I think on one hand, yes, all eyes should be on the first couple of rounds, because we've seen, whether it was, the fourth round of the US Open last year, the third round of the Australian Open this year, she's perhaps not always at her best, still playing her way into the tournament. And then once she gets into those semifinals, I think she's probably only lost one semi, and I don't think she hasn't lost a final yet. So, that's a tremendous, statistical accomplishment that she's already achieved for herself at 23 years old. That said, I don't see the Kenin. I don't see Kenin. I think I look at an Angelique Kerber, perhaps, if not a Yulia Putintseva, though Swiatek has such a good record against Putintseva. I'm not as concerned about that one. I think for Iga, the big test is likely going to come in the fourth round against either a Caroline Garcia, a Elena Ostapenko, or wild card Aussie Ayla Tomljanovic, who has twice reached the quarterfinals here. And I do think that is a situation where experience and a sense of familiarity. Tomljanovic is used to a big stage, has played big players before. I circle that winner of Tomljanovic Ostapenko as perhaps the biggest threat to Swiatek's march to the final.
Yeah, I think this section features maybe two of your favorite first round matches you have of the opening round in the Tomljanovic Ostapenko matchup. Again, Ostapenko did not have a good grass court season. She really hasn't been good since the end of February, but just won the doubles title this week. And if you watched the match with Bolter, that was the first signs of life from Ostapenko. It felt like in quite some time how she fought back from that big first set deficit. Yeah,
that serve point notwithstanding.
Exactly. Tomljanovic, of course, made a final a couple of weeks ago. Still looking for her first tour level title. Felt like she might get it there, but again, working her way back. Obviously, she has made second week runs at Wimbledon before. Still, for me, there are two tests in this immediate section, and obviously, if Ostapenko gets to round number 4, that I suppose implies that she is playing better tennis than we've seen from her in months. And then, of course, she opts into becoming a threat. I think if healthy, Siniakova is a real threat just because she takes swings. She'll take cuts. She'll make Iga. She'll stretch Iga into the outer thirds. And just, again, for someone who hasn't played a grass court match this year, find ways to make Iga uncomfortable. The other one to me is probably Caroline Garcia. And it's that her making the fourth round, it implies that she is serving well, implies that she does have weapons to make Swiatek uncomfortable. And I get that the last 2 years, the players who have beaten Iga on this surface aren't the big hitters. It's been Cornet. It's been Svitolina. But for me, it's not 2022 or 2023 Iga anymore. It's a 2024 Iga who holds over 80% of the time, who just is that much better with the +1. And yeah, I still have some questions about her forehand on this surface moving forward. I have no answers to those questions because I didn't get to see her play any grass court matches so far this year. The lack of premier power players, given the lack of form right now of Garcia and Ostapenko in this section, I actually feel pretty good if I'm Swiatek going into this, especially given that first week where it's like, yeah, Siniakova has some weapons, but I will have time. So even if it's a Putintseva or a Kerber, they don't have the weapons to hurt Iga. She will have that first week to work her way into form. I actually think this section broke pretty well for her.
Yeah, I agree, because I think by the time you start to get to the fourth round quarterfinals, to make another comparison to another, illustrious talent, a Rafa Nadal has enjoyed playing tennis the second week of Wimbledon. He feels like the courts play slower. They play a bit more like a clay court. The grass gets worn out by the baseline. ample opportunity. And I do think that if there were some of the, the big hitters, then there's a slew of them in that Garcia Ostapenko section, whether it's a Dodin, a Darius Nagur, an Ayla Tomljanovic. I mean, these are some really interesting players that if they were a potential second, third round opponent, I would be even more cautious if I were a Swiatek fan. But I do think that this is a really solid way for her to work her way into the draw.
Yeah. Potapova also, what was it, 0-1 against Iga at the French Open? Like, otherwise it would be an interesting name, but
it was 0-0 for us.
Yeah, okay. I was trying to be I was trying to be kind.
Or 10 points.
10 points. I think your prediction was 9, if memory serves me correct. Yeah, I think Swiatek gets through this section and into the quarterfinals. Although, again, if Ostapenko or Garcia gets to the 4th round, that means they've shown a level that we just haven't seen from them of late. That's why I would feel comfortable if I'm Iga. Bottom half of her quarter, her other seed, she drew Danielle Collins of career 6-9 record on grass courts. Of course, reigning Wimbledon champion Marketa Vondrousova also in this section. The question is, of course, how healthy is the number 6 seed coming into this event? Your other seeds in the section, Beatrice Haddad-Maia, Barbara Krejcikova. In theory, Clara Tauson versus Danielle Collins would be a fun first-round matchup. I don't know how well either will play on this surface. That does feel like a big opportunity for Tauson. If this was 2022, Kudermetova versus Krejcikova would be a really cool first-round matchup, but it's not. Again, it's the lack of, I guess, spoiler alert, I have Haddad-Maia coming out of this section. This is a weird one to me. And if Vondrousova is healthy, of course, I think she will emerge and be the one to give Iga a push, but I just haven't seen her at her healthiest for any prolonged stretch so far this season. And so, again, this to me is the weirdest 8th, dare I say, of the draw, just given the lack of Collins' form. Otherwise, she'd be the clear pick, but we're on grass courts. What do you make of this section?
Yeah, I'm not as bearish on Vondrousova's injuries. I feel like the way we've seen both Vondrousova and Karolina Muchova, that unless they are out for significant stretches and maybe just coming back, I read less into the injuries and how they impact their play. I mean, we saw Muchova make a Grand Slam semifinal last year with, big strapping on her arm. We've seen Vondrousova win Wimbledon with strapping. I think they are able to play through certain levels of injury that if they are committing to these tournaments week in, week out, that they are okay enough. And I do think this is the kind of quiet section that will allow Vondrousova as the defending champion to, again, play her way into this tournament. I look at a Danielle Collins who seems to, in a totally respectful and fair way, has taken her foot off the gas a little bit. It's not like I think she was at a 12 from Miami through Paris and is maybe giving herself an opportunity to recharge and recover with the Olympics and US Open up ahead of her. That is a very interesting match against Clara Tauson. Tauson, who's typically played her best on clay, but is also a very big hitter. That always that apex of the delta of like power tennis versus speed or bounce. The way that all impacts whether you're a better clay court or grass court player. But you look at her at Vondrousova's seed being a Krejcikova. I think something has gone very wrong for Vondrousova, or she retires in her first round and then we don't see her again for the rest of the year. I think those are really the for a player who deals in extremes. I have either very high hopes or I think this might be her last match of the season, basically, if she's as injured as people fear that she is, as some fear that she is.
Yeah, fair enough. And again, I think this is where things get weird. This is, to me, going to be the funky section. And look, the Haddad-Maia case, some might be laughing when they hear that from me. She's 16-17 overall on the year. She's 29-16 in her career on grass courts. Made second week of Wimbledon last year before getting knocked out due to retirement against Rybakina. I just think this is a section with opportunity. And certainly looking in this Swiatek quarter of the draw, the more dangerous threats to Swiatek, it feels like in her section, probably do come out of that first week. You'd take the level of even a Putintseva, maybe over the level right now coming into this event of anyone in this bottom half of her quarter. That's why I see Iga emerging from this section, getting to the semifinals. Again, I just need to see a first week from Vondrousova before I believe she'd have the level to challenge Swiatek with any sort of seriousness. I know we haven't seen Iga play a grass court match so far this year. For what it's worth, Vondrousova did just make quarters of Roland Garros. I don't know. Again, give me your thoughts on the section before we advance to quarter number 2.
Well, I mean, spoiler alert, I'm not that concerned with Ivan Drusevic to quarterfinals because I didn't really think you're going to make the quarters. But yeah, I don't know. I look at, that Haddad Maia is an interesting pick because I feel like we are starting to see a trend of clay court players play well on grass, whether it's a Jabeur, there are players who are just, even a Putintseva, who's made multiple Roland Garros quarterfinals, is now starting to feel comfortable on grass. Simone Halep a few years ago, making her way on clay, winning Roland Garros and winning Wimbledon, and kind of surprising herself with how she was able to adjust to the surface. There are some elements of the way modern grass plays that is starting to lend itself to historically clay court specialists. I suppose unless maybe you're Casper Ruud, but everybody else is starting to, find their ways to win on the surface in a way that is less obvious than maybe even a clay to hard or a grass to hard. It feels like now we're starting to see players play really well on clay and grass and maybe struggle on hard courts. Famously, Ostapenko preferring clay and grass because she finds hard courts just too easy.
Yeah. No, I mean, watching Diana Schneider's forehand today on all week long in Bad Homburg, it was like, how is this working on grass courts? But she's just firing darts around the court. Again, Haddad Maia won 13 straight matches on grass courts back in 2022. She won Nottingham, Birmingham, back-to-back semifinals, Eastbourne. Big lefty, big weapons, holds the baseline well. I have a Swiatek Haddad Maia quarterfinal. Swiatek ultimately advancing to the semis out of this section. And again, we'll get into our predictions as we continue through. We'll wrap up our predictions, when we get to the end of all these draw previews. Let's move on now to the Rybakina quarter of the draw. Elena Rybakina, of course, your number 3 overall seed. She does fall in the Swiatek top half. Number 4 overall seed, falling in the Swiatek top half. Her first round matchup, a matchup with Elena Gabriela Rusa. You look at the other seeds in this section, 5th seeded Jessica Pegula, of course, won a title a couple of weeks ago, falls in this section. You have Kalinskaya, a finalist a couple of weeks ago. She's in this section. Samsonova won a title grass court season a week number 1 this year. Fernandez, finalist here this week in Eastbourne. Svitolina, semifinalist last year. Of course, Katie Boulter won a title here this year. And then, on top of all that, how about 2-time reigning Wimbledon finalist, Ons Jabeur, just sitting in this section as well. For me, DK, pound for pound, this is the most loaded quarter we have in this Wimbledon women's singles draw. And again, this is why if I'm a Swiatek fan, I'm actually feeling pretty good about how the draw broke out. Because yes, all these players are in the top half of the draw. And Iga will eventually, in theory, have to go through one of them. But they are going to be beating each other up those first 5 matches before they'd even see Swiatek in a hypothetical match number 6. This section fascinates me. What jumped out to you?
Yeah, I do feel like section 3, the Rybakina, Samsonova, Fernandez, Wozniacki, Alicia Parks section is very much like the cracked rackets quarter of the draw. Like it's kind of everybody that we talk about the most and players we've been asking questions about for the last several months. I mean, Leila Fernandez, I can't count the number of times you've asked me, is she back? Is she working her way back? Is she on her way back? And I've always been like, no. But this is actually the first time I feel pretty confident in Leila Fernandez. The way that she has been competing on grass is reminiscent of that sort of peak Fernandez who sort of buzzes her way through draws, all of a sudden makes herself, a contender for those later rounds at a slam, which then, sort of invalidates some of the other really talented players in this draw that I think are capable and probably should be deeper in this section. But I look at who they'd have to play, how they're playing right now, how they've played at slams lately, and I'm less confident. I mean, if you think of, I think we would all, certainly myself, a fan of the power, the flat hitting tennis, would love to see a 4th round between a Rybakina and a Samsonova, but just I question whether we're going to get that.
Yeah, I mean, again, looking at the first round matchups, you mentioned one already, Parks Wozniacki, the contrast in styles. Alicia Parks having won 125K last week on grass courts, then qualifies into the main draw here at Wimbledon. She's got momentum. She's got form. Obviously, Wozniacki banging up her knee this past week in Bad Homburg. Hopefully she will be healthy, fit for that match. That's a fascinating contrast of styles. You have that in the top half of this quarter. And then my second favorite match, bottom half, just the All-American battle, Pegula, Kruger. Ashlyn Kruger will be very good in the future. Like certainly going to be a top 50 player. The weapon she possesses, and it feels like she's getting more comfortable with her length, with her movement every passing day. But for me, this quarter is all about the projecting. You're right. And you look at the top half of the quarter first. Again, for Rybakina, a pathway to round 3 gets pretty simple. But after that, like if it is a Fernandez or a Parks who just can do things to make anyone uncomfortable, although Rybakina's pace against Fernandez, like that feels like a particular problem for Leylah on this surface still.
Is it? I mean, we've
Uh,
seen Fernandez beat Sabalenka. You know,
that's yeah,
certainly U.S. Open hard courts not as
yeah, but
fast,
not
but
grass court. That's what I'm saying. It's just like because of how quick it is and how quickly that ball will get on her on the return. Like that's where Fernandez wants to take things early. Can you take things early against Rybakina on this surface? That to me would be an interesting test. But again, like after that, again, even if it's not a Samsonova, if it's a Kalinskaya who's been swinging so freely on quick surfaces all year long, and again, I think she's 9th in the points race right now. Like you move into that bottom half of the draw, trying to project. Where are you in your confidence level with Jabeur? I feel like we do this before every major, but look, she is the 2-time reigning Wimbledon finalist. She is #1 in grass court raw ELO ratings. If you look at just those results, her compared to the field. Eye test wise, I know she didn't have a big finals appearance on the grass court season, but the eye test wise, the matches she played against Pliskova in the loss, the first set she played against Gauff, coming off of a quarterfinals at Roland Garros, I actually think Jabeur's level is pretty high. Now, again, looking at this draw, the idea of playing a Montgomery who comes in hot, obviously the institutional knowledge of a Svitolina or the weapons of a Niemeyer. Beyond that, if it's a Bolter, if it's a Pegula, like those are real tests. Where are you with the reigning finalists? Her chance to get back to it.
it feels like she's really kind of leveled out, Jabeur. Like we're not quite at the highs that we were at last year, where we felt like, oh, she's a contender to make the final, but we're not quite at the lows of, oh my God, we're never going to see her play tennis on a serious level again. But I do wonder, without those highs, without that extreme confidence, without that, ability to sort of play to the crowd as part of, I do think Jabeur enjoys being a favorite. I think she has someone who has lifted her level the better she played, and yet when she's not at that super high level playing, sort of returning to the scene of the crime, as it were, the site of her singular disappointment as a tennis player. If she does end up retiring without having won a slam, that will be the match that everyone goes back to, much like I think of that Australian Open interview that they did with Dinar Safina, where they made her revisit her 6-0, 6-3 loss to Serena Williams. And I was like, damn, you couldn't have made her revisit the Djokovic match from that tournament. Like, she played so well in that one. Like, that was mean. And they did the same with Hachikova too, when she lost the semifinal in 2008 to Ana Ivanovic with the shoe squeaking. They're like, remember that? And both Hachikova and Safina were really good sports about it, describing it. But yeah, I think of Jabeur right now, and I just, for her, if she makes the second week, could she make it deep? I don't know. I just feel like she certainly doesn't have the sort of obvious, maybe a Robin Montgomery, but it's not the sort of obvious experienced floaters in her section where you feel like, oh, this is, but certainly players who've won a lot of matches, an Uchijima, a Montgomery, a trending up Yulia Niemeyer, or even a Golubic who's played very well on grass in the past, but maybe doesn't have the same number of matches coming in. How is Svitolina? Is she healthy? How is the back? Someone who played really, really well. I was really quite inspired by the way that she finished that match against Swiatek at Wimbledon last year. Made me think she was really the contender for the title. That semifinal against Von Drusva sort of showed up flat. Was a disappointment, certainly for her. I think that was a really big opportunity for her in retrospect to walk away with a slam title. But all of which to say, what are my hopes? I order my hopes, sort of my expectations for Jabeur. I think if she can sort of shake off the ghosts of last year, I think there is certainly potential, because I don't think that, much like Iga, she'll have to play everybody. She'll only have to play one or two of those top players, in the fourth round quarterfinals. But I don't know if she makes it there. I feel like that there has been a bit of a step back for her in her own mind of whether I am a Grand Slam contender versus a Grand Slam person, a Grand Slam attendee.
No, it's fair. And again, I look at her pathway in particular, looking at this draw, like, again, Montgomery is in form. You're right. Golubic, Niemeyer, they're tough opponents. Obviously, Svitolina, if healthy, can be tough, but like she's got to be pretty happy with this section. And should she get to that fourth round, I think Pegula and Bolter could very much beat up on each other. I even think Harriet Dart is always tricky on a grass court. Like, I just think Jabeur's got to be pretty happy of, okay, like I have to go through one of these two to get to that quarterfinal round. And again, we talked about that top half of the quarter for a Rybakina, who's going to have to face maybe a Fernandez and Samsonova or Kalinskaya duo back to back. Like, she will get a somewhat perhaps wounded Elena Rybakina. Now, again, from a matchup perspective, obviously we saw Rybakina beat Jabeur at Wimbledon in the 2022 final. I do think this draw has opened up well for Ons Jabeur. And again, it's very much an eye test thing. It was what you have to turn to a lot, although for Jabeur, there is a little bit healthier database of grass court results to turn to in her past. She's really good on this surface. It makes sense why she would be. Her attacking game style, the variety she employs, just how uncomfortable she makes you when she hits the backhand chip line, and then you have to pop something up for her to take early and come in behind. She knows who she is on this surface in a way a lot of different players don't. I actually think Jabeur gets through this section and advances to a meeting with Elena Rybakina. Now, I think from there, Rybakina's power just too much to overcome on this. I think Elena Rybakina should win multiple Wimbledon titles throughout the course of her career, and we'll talk about that upside as we move on in this conversation. But I think we get a Rybakina Jabeur 2022 final rematch in the quarters. I would take Rybakina to get through. I'm very much sticking with my consolidation takes, DK, that I've ridden into the second half of the season, despite the question marks. I don't feel great about it, but that's my pick for the section. Where did you end up?
It's not quite where I went. I went all in on Leylah Fernandez, and I actually went on recency bias with a Jessica Pegula, who is, coming back fit, healthy, won a title on grass, was very close to making the semifinals of Wimbledon last year. Perhaps there is an element for Pegula where, there is a bit of a second wind from taking some time off, knowing that perhaps we don't know how much longer she intends to play. Certainly someone who doesn't seem like the type that's going to play forever. Let's just say that. And, is confident, playing well on the surface, doesn't really have an obvious, if she can get past the Katie Bolter section, I think the draw does start to open up her because she will have a bit more confidence, I think, than an Ons Jabeur. There won't be the same amount of scar tissue in the fourth round as there would have been in the quarterfinals. And then if she makes it to the quarters, an opportunity against the Leylah Fernandez, although I might have won the other way with that one as well. Again, I went all in. If there are any, I'm hoping to build some Canadian fandom on this live stream because I really went all in on a certain Canadian.
Will you make the Leylah case for us?
I think I could do it again.
Well, just like, no, I'm saying like what a win looks like. That's what I meant to say is her beating Rybakina. What does that look like in your mind?
It looks like her getting a lot of balls back, redirecting Rybakina's pace. I don't think that, even with the grass court advantage, that Rybakina hits the ball as hard as a Sabalenka, and Fernandez has beaten Sabalenka. And I just feel that the way that Rybakina has approached the slams this year and has approached most tournaments this year does not make me feel full of confidence that there is a slam coming for her. She certainly is. She's certainly the most talented player in this quarter, and she certainly should win a lot of Wimbledons, but nothing about the last several weeks has inspired much confidence in me.
I guess that's my question. Is this a take for Fernandez or a take, look, I think Rybakina is going to lose and I need to find the person to do it?
No. This is how I opened, is I feel like it's sort of the perfect mix of both, is that there are some flagging top seeds and some inform low seeds. And that's sort of where we're kind of making this sort of tropical storm of an upset. It is not necessarily, as I have said, I've been pretty low on Fernandez when you've tried to ask me to up her. And so this is speaking to the way that she is coming into this tournament. Again, provided she's healthy, provided, all of that, and she can make it into the third round. I do think she's going to be a very tough, because she is sort of unflappable when she is healthy and playing her best. And we've seen Rybakina be quite flappable by contrast. Someone who does get frustrated and upset in these situations.
I've been talking about it all week long. Eye test wise, Fernandez is playing as well as ever. Now, she was under 500 on the year going into last week, now 17-14 overall on the season. I'd go the other way. I think Rybakina is due for a big major. You're right. She has struggled there and been excellent everywhere else so far this season. I think she's due. I have her going through, but certainly, again, a loaded section of the draw. Let's move over to the Sabalenka section of the draw. Obviously, a section opened up now given the injury of Aryna Sabalenka, who announced she's having issues with her shoulder. You look at the seeds in this section, the other top 8 seed offered, number 8 seeded Zheng Qinwen, who, of course, we saw made the Australian Open final earlier this year, played a very fun match against Naomi Osaka a couple of weeks ago, earning a victory over her in Berlin before getting knocked out 4-4 by Siniakova. Of course, your other seeds in this section, Maria Sakkari, Eastbourne champion Daria Kasatkina, Ekaterina Alexandrova, Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova, Mira Andreeva, and Diana Yastremska. DK, as you looked at this section of the draw, what jumped out to you most?
Well, I think if I had looked at it 24 hours ago with any depth, as I was unable to do because I was busy at the time, I would have really went all in on Sabalenka, because I just felt that even going back to Paris, had she been not sick, she certainly seemed like the odds-on favorite to make the final of Roland Garros. Coming into Wimbledon, just anything that may have held her back on clay would not be the case on grass. Was certainly very close to making the final at Wimbledon last year. She seemed pretty healthy. The shoulder injury didn't seem like a huge deal, in the warm up when she retired against Kalinskaya. You just feel like, okay, this is just, she got her match on grass, and we're prioritizing Wimbledon. But then for her to come into the pre-tournament press conference and say she's one of 3 people to be experiencing the injury that she's having, and it hurts every time she serves, it's sort of like, sweetie, don't play. Like, why are you doing this if you're potentially risking, the rest of the season? Obviously, it is Wimbledon. It is a huge opportunity for her to win another slam. But if you're not healthy and you're in a section of the draw with, an informed Donna Vekic, even a Diana Yastremska, even a Daria Kasatkina, who just won a title on grass, who, yes, you've played very good tennis against, but if she is, healthier than you, and your biggest weapon in your serve is neutralized, then suddenly it's not looking so obvious for Sabalenka, because I think 3 of us on the tennis.com team picked her to win, but that was before having the knowledge that she was not perhaps at 100%. And then you start to look at players like Amira Andreeva, who, I think that we've pointed out some tremendous symmetry between herself and Maria Sharapova, though they don't play the same tennis. There's certainly a bit of stars aligning for her. I think they'll be about the same exact age as one another. If Andreeva goes on to make the Wimbledon final, she'll be the same age that Sharapova was when she won Wimbledon 20 years ago in 2004. And she seems to be someone who's really rising to her potential in the last couple of weeks. So I do look at her above all else in this quarter.
Yeah, the thing for Andreeva, she played 1 match here on grass courts, a first-round loss in straight sets last week in Bad Hamburg to Diana Yastremska. Now, of course, you look for Andreeva in her career, first of all, still just 17 years old. She hasn't played a lot of matches, period. 8 total matches
is there a player you want to play less than a Diana Yastremska as your first match on grass?
And I also just want to remind everyone, she made round of 16 as a qualifier at this event last year, beat Krejcikova, beat Potapova before getting knocked out in 3 sets by Madison Keys. Like,
beat Keys.
Yeah, we've seen her have success on this surface. And so I absolutely think that's a good player to shout out. I mean, from a first round perspective, Sabalenka has to be on your must-watch list just to see how healthy she is, because obviously that has the biggest impact on the tournament moving forward. But there are some juicy little matchups here. This might be my favorite section in terms of first round matchups, to have Badosa versus Muchova. I mean, that just feels mean from the tennis gods, but certainly 2 players who have been top 10 in the last 3 years. Like, that's
once a 4th round here.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really fun matchup. Brenda Fruhvirtova versus Mira Andreeva. You want a glimpse into the future? The only player younger than Mira Andreeva. Oh, actually, who is younger? Andreeva or Fruhvirtova? Let's find out right now. Fruhvirtova 17 in 2 months. Andreeva 17 in 1 month. So the 2 youngest players in the top 100 doing battle in round number 1. Again, a little glimpse into the future there. Top half of the quarter. I mean, Raducanu versus Alexandrova is a very interesting matchup to me. I think the winner of that one's my favorite to advance out of the section, because Maria Sakkari does not come into this event with any sort of form, struggled in her grass court matches that she did play. Again, Pavlyuchenkova, fine, but I think that's a really tricky matchup round 1 with the weapons and aggressive game style of Taylor Townsend for her to even get through that. Yeah, Qinwen's serve is the biggest weapon in this section, but Emma Raducanu's made around week 2. At Wimbledon before. Alexandrova, I believe, has made week 2 at Wimbledon before. I think the winner of that match is my favorite to advance out of the section. And given the hometown environment, I took Raducanu to advance out of this top half of the quarter. DK, is that crazy? Or do you think things might get a little funky?
I did look at that Alexandrova Raducanu match because I think instinctively I wanted to go for Pavlyuchenkova, someone who, again, has played a lot of matches on grass.
I knew you would. Let the record, I knew you would.
I really did. But then I looked at the combination of Townsend as a first round opponent, and then also Pavlyuchenkova has not been great this year. So then my eye dropped down just a little bit, because otherwise it is a very confusing section for me, with a Wimbledon 2024 draw quarter, or section rather, anchored by a Zheng Qinwen and a Maria Sakkari on grass. Ruh-roh. Like, this is a huge opportunity for everyone who's not those top seeds. So I did look at Alexandrova Raducanu. I went the other way, and I went Alexandrova for sort of the same logic why Yastremska beat Andreeva. It's like, for your first opponent at a slam to be Alexandrova on grass, like, yikes. And you're not a Coco Gauff who, can, make the most of your athleticism and sort of find your ways out of those tricky situations that Alexandrova is going to put you in with her power. But then Alexandrova historically has not been an amazing slam player. And obviously Raducanu has played some very inspired tennis at Grand Slam. So I do think that feels like a very much a toss up. And I do think that whoever wins that one will go very deep.
She's also made 2 quarters in the grass court season, semis in Nottingham, actually. Quarters Eastbourne, beat Pegula, played really close matches against Kasatkina and not Kasatkina, but against Bolter as well in her loss there. Like, Emma Raducanu's playing as well as she has played since the 2021 U.S. Open. She's made quarterfinals in 3 of her last 4 events. She's made 3 total quarterfinals this year. She made 3 total during the 2022 season, DK. Raducanu's back. She's talked about in press how she's refound her love for the sport as well. I just think it's a massive moment. I wonder if that match gets flexed to center court, given the fact that Alexandrova is at least a seed as well. I think Raducanu I agree. I think the winner of that one gets through the section. I'm glad we've hedged our bets here and you went the Alexandrova route. I don't have the confidence in Qinwen's forehand holding up on this surface yet as good
or
as
serve.
the serve. Yeah, oh, exactly. If the serve percentage was higher, maybe, but it's just not there quite yet. I mean, again, this feels like the slam where everyone has written off Maria Sakkari. So usually that's when she makes a quarterfinal type of run. And this feels like a section where, given there's no prohibitive favorite, why couldn't she? I'm sticking with Raducanu as the pick. You're going with Alexandrova. What about the bottom half of this section? Given the Sabalenka injury, what route are you taking?
Yeah, I'll just say that I do think that Alexandrova Raducanu will probably be like a TBA court, and it'll be one of those like 5-6 p.m. center courts that kind of end up there at the last minute. It may not be on the original draft, but I think it will end up making it onto a big court. And the crowd will be happy to see it because it'll be a very entertaining one. I certainly think it would go the distance. Yeah, I do. Without Sabalenka as the anchor in that section, my eye does go to Andreeva, who just seemingly made of win at these sorts of rises to the occasion, will not necessarily be overpowered by anyone in her section of the draw, certainly not a Kasatkina, who may be in for sort of a mental moment, against someone as young and fresh as an Andreeva. I think that may be something that plays on a Kasatkina's mind more than the average top player. And then when you look at what may be an abandoned Sabalenka section, things start to really open up for Amira Andreeva, who I don't doubt has the guile to be able to compete on the surface, if not the power. And so I have high hopes for Andreeva coming into this tournament for sure.
I think that, again, also, how healthy is Muhova? How healthy is Badosa? Like, Paula Badosa played really well. Again, Badosa played awesome in her Bad Hamburg match. Diana Schneider was just top 10. Like, she said after the match, hey, you play like this, you're going to be top 10. Like, that's how well Diana Schneider was playing this past week.
Which is always like kind of shade. Maybe it's not necessarily for Schneider because she's so young that she could still
really happy you
top
said
10,
that.
But
I'm so happy you said that, because you're saying that after the win is like, hey, let's acknowledge you played out of your mind today. And she's like, actually, I'm just 20. Like, I'm just getting better.
There were so many. I would love we should do like a countdown of like players who have been tagged with that. Oh, she could be top 5 and like sort of see how that 100%. Ends up bearing out, because there'll be some wacky names on that list for sure.
No, absolutely. But again, I was looking through these numbers this week, obviously, given the success Daria Kasatkina has had this week, and again, ultimately your Eastbourne champion. It is the quietest, massive start to a year we have on the resume. She's 26-13. Like, she's winning 2/3 of her matches. She won a 500 level title last week. She made a final in Abu Dhabi earlier this season. She made a final in Charleston earlier this season. The problem is she had second round exits in both Australia and Roland Garros. And you wonder if this might be a Rybakina type case where it's like, hey, she's kind of due for a major result as well. The fact that it is a banged up Sabalenka, I think Kasatkina would be my default choice. Now, I submitted my predictions to Westhoff yesterday, and I just didn't have the heart with all the graphic work he was doing to say, hey, can we change the Sabalenka part of it all? So I left her as my pick still, because if she is healthy, let me just say this. I said all week long that I will be predicting Sabalenka Swiatek finals for the next 6 majors. And for me to abandon that at major number 1, that's just not who I am, DK. I make promises. I try to keep them to my core. So I kept Sabalenka there, but I actually think my default pick would be Kasatkina.
Something I will say, and this is whether this
I always like that start.
Whether people will take this as a compliment or an insult, sort of the way that Sabalenka described the injury reminds me a little bit of like a Novak Djokovic, the way that he'd been like, my muscle tear. It's like, I risk, my playing my career even further if I play this, and then he plays through it and wins the Australian Open. So I mean, whether this is, no, and I'm not saying it's not a serious injury, but I'm saying that maybe
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. It's expectation setting.
Yeah, and they're very close. I do think that Sabalenka is very inspired by Djokovic. Maybe this is, the point is we will see what the shoulder injury really looks like. She'll certainly have a very preferable first round, against Anita Bektis. Certainly not someone who's going to make you, it's not going to really challenge you that first round. And if she's not playing well, we'll probably, ascribe listen, this is half my podcast right now. We're not going to blow her up right now, but I mean, we're looking at, second round. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. But back in reality, if Sabalenka's playing 100% or even close to 100%, that shouldn't be a problem. I look perhaps at that second round against the Donna Vekic. That might be a bit trickier. And then certainly a Diana Yastremska in the third round. But I think by the time, if Sabalenka is able to not play terribly through the first two rounds or does not appear visibly injured for the first two rounds, I think she'll be okay. I think it'll be pretty evident within the first set and a half if the serve is really compromised. And certainly what she says after her first match, should she win it, will also be instructive. But I wonder, part of me wonders how seriously to take this injury, but I also don't think that Sabalenka is the kind of, she's almost too honest in a way. So I kind of don't, which is not to say that I don't think Djokovic is honest, but I just think that Djokovic certainly has more experience playing through pain and injuries versus a Sabalenka who had only just retired from a match for the first time ever last week.
The Vekic shout out by you is a very good one, because I've been saying this on the mini break. Even when she lost first round to Pegula 2 weeks ago, she should have won that match. Like, she was the better player and had a million opportunities. And again, that was a big win for Jessie to just grind that one out after not getting a big win like that in a couple of months. What does Vekic do after taking that tough loss? Gets a couple of really good wins, right? She beats Ekaterina Alexandrova this week. She beats, I don't think it was Siniakova, but was one other big name on her way to that final in Bad Homburg. Yeah, she gets knocked out by Schneider in the final. I'm telling you, this was the Diana Schneider week where everyone takes notice, where now, again, it's not going to be former college tennis standout Diana Schneider. It's going to be rising 21 and under prospect Diana Schneider moving forward.
Shout out to that speech, by the way, that Schneider gave. It was a really, that was a tight 10. I was impressed.
Did I not tell you that you would love her? Like, some of the press quotes she offered up in college are delightful, and we'll talk about them more. We don't have to do that now. We can do that later.
She gave you like a rule of three. I was like, wow, this is a very well-structured joke. Like, I was very impressed.
She's great. I'm telling you, the whole NC State program, I've said this to you before, but you are going to be an Amelia Raetsky fan. It's not if, it's when that happens, David Kane, because
that's a new name, because I feel like you gave me another one that started with the letter V that I'm blanking on.
Oh, Dasha Vidmanova. That's funny.
There we
go.
That's
another good one too. No, I got to introduce you to NC State women's tennis head coach Simon Earnshaw, one of my favorite human beings on the planet. Like, you never come out of a conversation with Simon and go, man, I regret doing that. Like, it's just always a delight. And so you would love him. But anyways, that's a discussion for a different time.
That's assuming that college tennis players have never listened to me speak. So yeah. I don't know how enjoyable it'll be for me, but it might be enjoyable for them, or vice versa.
No, he has thoughts on everything. He's the man. Anyways, discussion for a different time. I'm sticking with the Sabalenka pick. Vekic has the highest upside in this section. Kasatkina would be my pick. Outside of Sabalenka, Kasatkina would be my pick, though, to advance if I was to make a redo. But I'm sticking with the Sabalenka thought. Their final section is an interesting one, DK. You look at the Coco Gauff section of the draw. Now, again, Jasmine Paolini career record, not very good on grass courts. Jasmine Paolini this week, she looked darn good on the grass courts, ultimately knocked out in 3 sets by Kasatkina, but the level in that match was extraordinarily high. The 6-3 set she put together in set 1, I mean, that's what the best players in the, I mean this as a compliment, that's what the best players in the world do to Daria Kasatkina. She works them around the court, but then they go, okay, that's cute, but I have a weapon to finish this point in a way you don't. And to see Paolini do that for even a set, like, lesser opponents just ain't going to be able to hang. So the number 7 seed, who is clearly, she's 5th in the points race right now. That speaks for itself. Like, if I could redo my contenders list, she would be a tier 3, top 13-ish contender. She's in this section. The other seeds in this section, of course, 12th seeded Madison Keys, 16th seeded Victoria Azarenka, 18th seeded Kostyuk, 19th seeded Navarro, 26th seeded Noskova, 29th seeded Sorana Cirstea. There are some darn good seeds in this section, David Kane. I like this quarter a lot. Obviously, lingering in this section as well. Listen to the unseeded players. Bianca Andreescu, who has a round-one matchup against Jacqueline Christian. And then in this bottom half of the draw, Vika versus Sloane in. Pliskova versus Schneider in. Naomi Osaka in this section of the draw as well. And she's taking on a rising Diane Parry. You know my thoughts. We've had that conversation before. Her serve, her first forehand should work on this surface. I like this section a lot, DK. What was your reaction to seeing it?
See, I found this the toughest quarter to pick. It just felt like certainly the Paolini Keys section. I mean, thinking about the way the Paolini has played the last couple of weeks, even the way that she's been able to play on grass, it's still not instinctive for me to pick her to go deep at slams. And I don't know. I certainly think if she makes a quarterfinal here, then maybe I think that at that point we've totally jumped the shark, and we're at the point where, okay, she's just a contender now to make it. She's one of those consistent players who we will see in the later rounds of slams. But I still feel like it still felt very hard for me to pick her, which is why, again, I looked northward towards Canada to a Bianca Andreescu, who very much impressed me in that match against Naomi Osaka and was very close to winning that title, assuming that she is healthy. This feels like perhaps not a now or never moment, but one of those moments that could very much change the trajectory of her season. Madison Keys, Linda Noskova, these are also very interesting names. It was just very hard for me to picture them making it into the quarters, maybe Madison Keys, but I still feel like Madison prefers a hard court as much as she's played well on grass in the past. I think she prefers the bit of a higher bounce that she gets on hard. I did go with Andreescu in this section. I need like a
Okay.
what's it, a Molson sponsor, certainly a Tim Hortons sponsor if all my predictions end up coming true here.
No, so first of all, I want
to this section, by the way, not the whole quarter. We haven't gotten to Coco yet.
I know. Let's go to the Coco section now, because to me, and I agree, the assessment of the top half, I think very spot on. I would go Madison Keys just because I'm a believer in her power tennis, and I said this all week long. Keys, Jabeur, Pegula. Jabeur and Maria Sakkari, if she was playing better, but she's not playing well enough to get on that list right now. The byproduct of the post-COVID era, top of 10. Their window is about 5 more slams, like that, realistically, before Swiatek is in her mid-20s, before, again, Sabalenka, Rybakina, who are already in their mid-20s, are clearly at the peaks of their powers. This young, rising crop of young talent we talk about so frequently as well. Gauff in a couple years in her mid-20s. Like, this is their window. And I think if you're Madison Keys, you look at this draw, and I just think matchup-wise, her serve is a problem for Jasmine Paolini to deal with. Jasmine Paolini also will be firing lollipops on serve, and if Keys can get a clean strike on the return, she is just going to beat you with how well she has played of late. Again, Kostyuk, Noskova, just not the institutional experience on this surface to expect them to make a run. I think this is a big opportunity for Madison Keys. I think if you're Coco Gauff, though, you look at this section of the draw, it's really scary on paper. But if Coco Gauff gets to the 4th round, which it'll be pretty easy for her to do relative to you look at that draw, the section above her is just going to be beating each other up. I mean, even if Osaka gets to round 3, she probably had to beat round 4, excuse me. She probably had to beat Navarro in round number 2. And then I don't care who it is. She had to beat one of Vika, Schneider, Pliskova, or Stevens in round number 3. Vice versa, that top half, you are getting 3 brutal matches before you even sniff a look at Coco Gauff. Whoever Gauff gets in round number 4 will be a big name, but that player comes in a little wounded, DK. And that's why I actually think, yeah, this section is awesome, but Coco Gauff is kind of the beneficiary of, nice, you guys beat each other up. I'll see you in week 2.
Yeah, this was really my big takeaway from the draw, which is the fact that this is a huge opportunity for Coco Gauff to potentially win a second slam. Because you look at Iga Swiatek, not the most comfortable on grass, will have quite a few big hitters in her section. A Sabalenka, under the weather, perhaps injured, and Elena Rybakina hasn't been particularly inspiring at slams. Those are the 3 people who have most consistently beaten Coco Gauff. And you take those players off the table, suddenly Coco is pretty much, 100% against everybody else. The serve is better. the form is better. I don't expect anything. I don't expect any scar tissue from last year's loss to Sophia Kenin to be a factor here, the way that I might expect, last year's finals loss to affect it on Jabeur. This is an opportunity again for a Coco Gauff to really go deep. Yes, I was very tempted to pick Azarenka because I feel like Azarenka certainly has a lot more institutional experience, to borrow a phrase from you. I feel like this is a big opportunity for Azarenka to perhaps, make one last big, deep run at a slam. But I just feel like Coco's been so solid. She's been so consistent with the serve, with the backhand, or all court game. If she's marginally more aggressive than she's ever been on grass, I think that's really going to pay dividends for her. And then all of a sudden, she's looking a lot tougher than she was a few months ago against Madison Keys, who managed to beat her and, only barely beat her, because I think that was a match where Coco hit 18 double faults. And all of a sudden, this is a matchup that is very comfortable for a Coco Gauff, and so then it becomes the same old story for Madison Keys, as I've often said. And then at that point, you're in a semifinal against, Amira Andreeva. This is certainly then all of a sudden a huge opportunity for a Coco Gauff. So I think this is a big opportunity for her and a way for her to play her way into this tournament. And I don't really see the name. I mean, obviously there's a Naomi Osaka, but for as well as Osaka has played, it has not yet really translated to results just yet. I mean, we're putting a lot of stock into a quarterfinal in Rome, or maybe even a fourth round in Rome, and a second round loss to Iga, and an opening and a loss to Bianca Andreescu. I mean, it's not there yet for me. I think it's certainly trending its way to be there in the summer, but it's not there yet. But yeah, this was probably the toughest quarter because it just really felt like Coco or bust.
Yeah, it's interesting, by the way. A lot of people in the chat agreed with your sentiment about Rybakina. They have doubts the way you do. I'll be curious if they agree with your thoughts.
Shout out to my fan.
No, you got a lot of fans. A lot of people excited to see you finally, DK, because they wanted that debut.
I love that.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah. It's so interesting. Coco Gauff, 19th in grass court raw specific ELO rating. So again, just measuring grass court results. You adjust grass court specific, but other results factored in as well. She's 5th in grass court adjusted ELO rating. It's funny. I looked at the records because this was intriguing to me. Who do you think's played more career matches on grass courts, Coco Gauff or Iga?
That's tricky because Coco's probably played more tournaments. So Coco?
The answer is Coco Gauff. 21-9 is Coco Gauff on grass courts. 16-7 is Iga Swiatek. Who's advanced farther at Wimbledon, though? Coco Gauff or Iga Swiatek?
Oh, Iga.
Iga to the quarterfinals. Coco Gauff has never made it past the round of 16, though she's made it there twice. That's the leap you have to make. Yeah. And it's just like, by the way, yeah, she's been good. Yeah, the serve has gotten better. Yeah, she moves forward more successfully. Yeah, to your point, you laid out the argument, the case for her perfectly. But will her forehand hold up? Like, any doubt you have about Iga would be a similar doubt to have about Gauff against elite competition. Now, the question is, again, are there enough players who are healthy right now who can generate the sort of elite power that makes Gauff uncomfortable? That is a wide open question, a very valid one to your point. But it is still, this sounds very stupid and self-evident. I need to see Coco Gauff win 7 grass court matches in a row before I believe that forehand can stand up that long.
Fair. But I also think that she's someone who's perhaps going to benefit from the Nadalism, that if you can make it into that second week, suddenly things start to look a bit more like clay. And I don't think there's really anyone in the first week, maybe a streaking Kirstea, who can break down the Coco Gauff forehand. And then all of a sudden, if she's in the fourth round against an Azarenka or a Sloane, someone who's not going to necessarily bring the kind of firepower to really challenge the Coco forehand, and then all of a sudden you're in the quarters and you're, according to in my universe, you're like the highest ranked player left in the draw. And then all of a sudden things start to look a bit more calm and relaxed. I mean, I never thought that Coco would win 7 matches in a row, period. She's already done that. And she has been, bar none, one of the most consistent players at slams over the last, year and a half. So it feels like this is a huge opportunity for her to really close the loop and gain some really important points for what's going to be a very tricky summer for her, having to defend 33% of her ranking, perhaps. There's a lot on the line between now and August for Coco.
The case against Coco, she leads the tour in wins against opponents ranked outside the top 20. She's 28-4 overall. Iga also 28 wins. She's 28-2, but tied for the most wins. The problem is you look for her against top 20 opponents this year. She's 4-6, right? Like, the big wins just aren't exactly there for Coco Gauff in a way that, again, I still want to see it, but I don't hate the prediction. I agree with your reasoning. I think it's a really fun. And you look at your second week.
Yeah, I know. I was gonna say,
again,
why are you still talking? We got to look
Yeah.
at the draw. We got to put like the circus music. I
Yeah.
got to put the clown makeup on. Like this is some clownery for me.
again,
but I feel it deep in my soul.
So DK's pick. I almost calls you David. That would have been weird. DK's picks.
DK's picks.
Yeah. Tomljanovic versus Vondrousova. Fernandez versus Pegula. I don't remember the Pegula pick of it all. That's fun. Alexandrova versus Andreeva, and Andreescu versus Gauff. This is a 2021 WTA, like a 2019. This is maybe the 2021 US Open run back. Like that's what you're seeing here this week, DK, which I kind of love. Talk me through your semifinalists.
Oh God, where did I go? I think I picked Vondrousova over Tomljanovic, which I believe is a rematch of their quarterfinal from a couple years ago. And then I picked Fernandez over Pegula just because, again, it's Pegula in a quarterfinal. It feels like a huge opportunity for Fernandez to make another slam semi. And I'm picking that Mira Andreeva heat. It just feels like she's trending up. She's so confident. She's so talented. I think it was a huge mental lift off her shoulders that she was able to close out that match against Sabalenka. And I don't think we're going to see necessarily the same sort of mental hiccups that we were seeing from her in some of these slam matches over the last couple of years. And we go back to Wimbledon last year. She lost that match to Madison Keys from a set and 4-1 up. I don't predict that happening again for her, at least for a little bit. And then obviously Coco Gauff, just the most consistent player in the draw. It just feels it, and the one with the least amount of question marks coming into this tournament. So I think that's, or maybe even the least to prove in a way. I mean, Iga's, can she play well on grass? Sabalenka, can she play well despite the injury? Rybakina, can she play well at slams? You know, Gauff has proven over the last couple weeks she's comfortable enough on grass. There's no major injuries, and she's played really well on slams. So for me, it really feels like, you know, a big opportunity for her. And then we see I guess we'll call it the Schiavone, the way that Vondrousova is going to be able to win the tournament last year out of nowhere and then make the final next year to be that really inspiring fairy tale run and an opponent for Coco Gauff, who I don't see buckling under the pressure, you know, in a Grand Slam final as a reigning Grand Slam champion and then taking home the title. So I bring it home in the end. The world number 2 will win a slam, but it's going to be a very interesting 2 weeks to get there.
That is just a fascinating way for Coco Gauff to get home. Can I ask the degree of confidence if you were going to put it out of 10? What scale?
I mean, this is as wild a swing as I've taken. I feel like we often
this is a swing.
We pick the seeds and God laughs. So I feel like this will be the one moment. It'll be like the top 8 seeds all make the quarters. Now that I put this out into the universe, it's going to be, oh my God, look at how consistent the top women are. They all made the quarterfinals. Who would have picked otherwise? And I would have been like full clown moment.
That's good. Well, the good news is
this is a possibility. This is a possibility among many. It's a permutation, if you will. Do not do not bet on this.
Yeah.
Just be entertained as I was creating it for you.
The good news is now we have a graphic to hold you to it as well. Once the
I know,
concludes.
oh my God.
Yeah.
And a screenshot of
and a
like
screenshot of your smile selling it. All right, you guys, my quarterfinals, Swiatek, Haddad Maia, Rybakina, Jabeur, Raducanu, my sneak pick. Again, in the Alexandrova section, Sabalenka, made that pick pre-injury. I'm going to stick with it. Keys versus Gauff, my other quarterfinal. I don't think it's going to shock you, DK, given my inclinations to lean towards the world number 1. I do have her advancing towards the semifinals. Again, I think the sort of tests she's going to see are the sort of tests she would hope for. And I do think the draw will break her away. I don't have a significant, again, the power hitter she was dealt in her section happened to be the power players who are not playing their best in particular right now. Siniakova is good. I don't know if she's beating Swiatek at a major good right now. I don't think Haddad Maia lefty into the backhand, like Iga just takes away things she wants to do so well. And again, at this point, Iga will have played 5 matches at Wimbledon and we'll know what her level looks like. I am going to go with Rybakina over Jabeur. I think if Rybakina gets there, it's just more proof that, again, her tennis works on this surface. Again, made the Sabalenka pick pre-shoulder injury. I like your Djokovic theory. Let's stick with it. I did go Keys over Gauff. And part of this was because I just saw Pegula beat Gauff last week.
Despite me, really, let's be honest.
No, yeah, always. And again, it's not to spite you. It's to double down on my own predictions. The draw is there for Madison Keys to make a run at this Wimbledon. It does feel like if that's her quarterfinal matchup, her serve into the Gauff forehand, the weapon she possesses, the opportunity to take some clean cuts, the fact that she won't, I mean, again,
it won't be a semifinal, which is a huge advantage for Keys.
Very true as well. I think she gets through. I'm going to trust her power tennis. I'm going to put the money where the mouth is. My final, I said it again, next 6, I'm taking Swiatek Sabalenka finals. I asked Gil Gross, how likely is it we get this scenario? It's the one thing we've yet to see between these two, that classic Swiatek Sabalenka slam final. Now, again, shoulder injury notwithstanding, I do think this would have been an opportunity for it to happen. I'm sticking with the world number 1. I think she takes the Channel Slam. I just think looking through history of all these major runs that all the greats have made, from Navratilova to Steffi Graf to Chris Everett, who, by the way, went back and looked up the stats because I excluded Chris Everett when I did the best 3 to 5 year runs, and I didn't exclude her intentionally. I know she's one of the 7, probably 3 best women of all time. I just ran out of time in putting together my list of numbers. And again, I thought Navratilova could be a good enough sample size representative of the
Love
era.
that.
No, I got someone on our Apple podcast was like, I love this show, but for him to exclude Chris Everett was criminal. And I was like, you're right. I agree. And I apologize. Thank you
Love
for the comments.
excuse that you ran out of time. You're just like, I got down to the wire. It's like, Chris Everett, bye.
Well, it was just like, it was the one name. No, I skipped her. Like, it was an accident. And I like went back and looked and I was like, whoopsies. Anyways, look,
there's also something about Everett and Navratilova, like maybe like doing an average of their records.
Yeah.
Like they're kind of like two halves in a way, where they kind of become one like behemoth player in that sense.
Exactly. It's like they won everything. The point is, every one of those players rips off a 6 to 12 like quarterfinals or further streak at the majors in their career. And that's the one thing Iga hasn't done yet. All of these players also make like 6 consecutive finals or further at some point in their career. Iga hasn't done that yet. There's also some of them, when the years line up right, they win a major, they win the Olympics, they have a massive summer. Like, it just feels like it's all kind of lining up for Iga. She wins the French Open, wins Rome, Madrid, French Open. Now she wins Wimbledon. Now she wins the Olympics. And now it's like, okay, she's the world number 1. We can put that dispute to bed moving forward. And she's won the quietest 19 in a row in tennis. You know, again, that's what all the greats do. They rip off multiple 20-match win streaks during their 3 to 5 year primes. I think it's a narrative pick. And because I agree with what you said at the top, there is so much uncertainty, so much confusion, like particularly given the injuries entering the women's singles side of things here. I'm going to go with the one thing I know best, which is that Iga is the best player in the world. And I'm just going to stick with that. And if that's where I'm wrong, I'm fine being wrong about that at this surface.
I mean, I think I'm more shocked by the Iga over Rybakina pick, because if you're picking Rybakina to make the semis, she's playing pretty well. And I've seen Rybakina play a Wimbledon semifinal before, and Simona Halep has certainly seen her play as a Wimbledon semifinal before, and it did not work out for her. But yeah, I think if the WTA was making a movie, this is a very good representation, a treatment, if you will, of where they would like things to go. And I think mine is maybe a bit closer to reality. And it is one of those things, it feels very classic WTA to be like, but the world number 2 won Wimbledon. And then you look at the draw and you're like, there was so much like chaos that happened, but logical chaos of, oh, but that player did well here, and that player did well here, and that player was injured. And that, you know, the WTA is always, what is always fascinating to me about the WTA, it's always the totality of it. And by putting all the pieces together, it makes sense. But it's often when you find the final product, it's a bit of a Monet. You really, you're like, wait a minute, what is that?
Yeah, no, I mean,
it's a reverse Monet, actually.
I agree. And again, we said this at the top, the women's singles list of scenarios, potential, what was permutations of results we might get, feels maximal. Like, it just feels like we're going to get a bunch. Like, there are a bunch of different ways, a bunch of different scenarios this could play out, from Iga being her best to Sabalenka being healthy to Rybakina being just fine to Coco Gauff, as the David Kane scenario laid out, emerging as the Wimbledon champion as well. I'll tell you what, we spent an hour on the women's draw. We are not going to be doing that for the men's singles draw, mostly because I don't want to kill David Kane, who's giving us his time so kindly here today.
I also think AC is off at the moment.
Well, yeah, I also think we don't have to spend as much time doing the men's side, because I just don't think it will be as chaotic, DK. And with that said, let's get into the men's singles draw now. We start at the top of the draw with the Jannik Sinner section. I mean, look, it is not the easiest section for the world number 1. And don't worry, I'm not going to make a big Jannik Hanfmann take for you. I could. I'm not going to, but I could. Former USC All-American, arguably the most underrated college tennis player of the 2010s. I could make the case, DK, but it starts with Berrettini as a potential round 2 opponent. Obviously, we just saw Hurkacz push Sinner to 6-6 in Halle. I mean, again, Berrettini could do the exact same thing, and maybe you're not going to get as lucky and win both breakers. In that scenario, Berrettini already making a final on grass courts this year. He's made 3 finals overall on the season. He's a former Wimbledon finalist on top of that as well. I think Griekspoor is a dangerous player always. We never going to go through a slam without me bringing up Griekspoor to you, DK. But again, if he already is healthy, Ben Shelton, not there yet on a grass court, but obviously you move down in this section for Sinner. Some other serious names: Dimitrov, Medvedev, big hitting Zheng Zhizhen. Manarino's been awful of late, but if he's ever going to get it right, it's on a grass court. And then, of course, lingering most dangerously, maybe unseeded Jan-Lennard Struff, who just has the game style to be a classic big server sort of run here. What do you make of this intersection?
I have to admit, I did not really touch down on the potential Berrettini second round. I think that speaks to my exponentially increased confidence in Jannik Sinner. I just feel like he is such a convincing number one to me. And I do think even in spite of the upward trend of the Berrettini, or even the fact that Sinner maybe is still a little bit not 100% fitness-wise, he was still able to win the tournament in Halle. Did not seem particularly busted up over having lost that, really tough semifinal to Alcaraz in Paris. It just feels like this is going to be the new normal now, where Sinner regularly makes it deep at these tournaments. I think that's something that the ATP has been quite good at over the years in terms of, the changing of the guard in a way that doesn't really that never really stumps you or comes completely out of nowhere. This is a name that we've gotten used to over the last couple of years, and now he's just taking his, rightful place at the top of the game. And I don't necessarily think that Berrettini over 5 sets has enough to do it. Although the thought of a Berrettini Dimitrov quarterfinal, I mean, that's very, like, the millennial teen girl is just screaming at the thought of that. One of them making the semifinals. And, you look at a Ben Shelton, who still probably doesn't have the same amount of experience to really make noise on grass. I think it's going to be all about the summer and all about the US Open for him. And then looking at the way Medvedev has not really risen to the occasion over the last couple of weeks, potentially getting a rematch against Zheng Zhizhen in the third round. I to be honest, I didn't really even look at him. I looked at Dimitrov and I looked at Sinner in this quarter.
That's interesting. Look, I mean, here's the thing. Berrettini came into last year's Wimbledon untested, unproven. He beat Zverev, he beat de Minaur on his way to the 4th round before getting knocked out by Alcaraz. Like, I agree with you. Beating this version of Jannik Sinner in 5 sets is a different test than beating those versions of de Minaur and Zverev. But his game style will always work best on this surface. He has weapons to take the racket out of Jannik Sinner's hands. Now, again, the problem is Sinner, the discipline, the power himself, the pace, like, he can attack the Berrettini weakness. He's not going to be as impacted by that Berrettini backhand slice. Berrettini's not going to be able to hit that slice as comfortably with the pace coming in.
Is this the ATP answer to Iga Naomi in Paris? Like, are we going to get that kind of hype? I mean,
maybe.
In a way,
that's a great
might be
comp.
more competitive or less competitive. I'm not sure, because obviously Berrettini has more bona fides on grass than Naomi ever had on clay. But it just seems like one of those really.
It's a great comp. That's well done by you. Look, again, here's the thing for Daniil Medvedev. Quietly, like, made the semifinals of Wimbledon last year. Like, again, I agree with you. He has not had an inspiring 6 weeks, but second half of the season is when Daniil Medvedev wakes up. And for a guy defending semifinal points, he's got US Open final points, obviously, to defend on the horizon as well. It kind of has to get things going right now, DK. And certainly you look at this draw, again, shout out to former Illinois All-American Alexander Kovacevic. That's my guy. I think Medvedev's going to be able to play through some of the things Kovacevic does, although Kovacevic will take some rips still. Like, you're right, the Zheng Zhizhen rematch. That's an interesting one on paper. It's really hard to beat a top 10 player in the world twice in 2 events, twice in 3 weeks as well. I like that he's seen that matchup before. Dimitrov obviously has played his best tennis over the course of the last 13 months. I've been making that case on this show 4 months. He's never been that good at Wimbledon over the course of his career. I believe he hasn't made a semifinal since 2014 or 13, something crazy like that at this event.
Yeah, 2014. But I mean, he wasn't making slam semifinals really anywhere.
No, but that's the other thing is he's kind of been Rybakina 2024-esque in that he's been really good at events that aren't the slams of late. Now, he was better at the French Open than he certainly has been in the past, but I don't know. I actually think things stick to script here. I think there are a bunch of different tests for Jannik Sinner along the way. I think it's going to end up Sinner Medvedev, and just give me the weapons of Sinner on this surface and how he'll be able to you know, we've seen him over the last 7 times he's played Medvedev just have the weapons to hit through that Medvedev conundrum. The Medvedev serve has also fallen off a cliff this year. That's a bigger discussion to have as we head in towards the second
Another
half.
shoulder injury.
Yeah, exactly. I do think it sticks script here. I go Sinner Medvedev, but final word on this section belongs to you.
I mean, oh God, the thought of another Medvedev Sinner match, the way that head-to-head is flipped, it's become so uncompelling. It's just, that's a brutal one. But was, certainly a major plot point in the Sinner rise. The fact that he was able to get those wins over Medvedev the last fall really set the stage for him to start beating players even, ranked even higher than starting to get those wins over Djokovic. Certainly a key point in that story for Sinner. But if Medvedev is making the quarterfinals, then he's certainly playing well. But I don't, I question how close that quarterfinal will be just based on how Medvedev has played against top players kind of all year. So certainly since Australia.
No, and I do think favorite first round, Yari versus Shapovalov. That's just a lot of power tennis. If this was 2014 and not 2024, Monfils versus Mannarino, that would be pretty awesome as well. The real best first round matchup in this section is without question Jan-Lennard Struff versus Fabian Marozsan. Like, Marozsan just absorbs pace well. He is as good as the opponent across from him. That said, Struff has the weapons to beat a Zhang Zhizhen in round 2, to beat a Daniil Medvedev in round 3, to just big serve his way through Dimitrov in round number 4 as well and end up in a quarterfinal. He is the obvious clear-cut sleeper pick in this section. But about a bunch of good matches. I have Sinner over Medvedev. You said you had Sinner over Dimitrov, right?
I did, and I just wanted to clarify that the best first round is going to be Berrettini-Fucsovic. That's the one everyone's going to be watching for reasons I assure you are only to do with the tennis and no other reason. That is going to be a popcorn match that everyone should tune in for.
Big overlap between viewers of that match and challenger viewers. Like, I feel like that's the first match they jump into.
And definitely watch all the changeovers. Don't look away. Like, you just want to see the whole one from start to finish. And maybe Zendaya will be there. We don't know.
That's when you hope is on ESPN Plus and just no commercial breaks. Yeah, just show me them on the changeovers. Yeah, I think that's well.
Emphasis on the plus.
Yeah, exactly. Don't be. Yeah. All right, we can move on from there to the Carlos Alcaraz section. I actually think, as sections go, this is like Carlos Alcaraz is looking to the tennis gods and saying, "Wow, like, you guys have been so good to me through my first 21 years of life," and they really have. Because look, Alex Vukic, Sebastian Ofner is an awesome first round matchup for a hipster like myself. Ofner played so well this week in Mallorca. He also played really well in his first 2. He lost to Draper week 1 of the grass court season, 6-6. Draper won that week. I'm blanking on who he lost to in 3 sets the next week, but it was a fantastic matchup. This week again loses to the title winner in Tabilo in Mallorca, hitting his forehand like Medvedev-esque at his best with how Ofner's hitting his forehand right now, taking on a Vukic who just made semis in Eastbourne, who can just big serve, big forehand his way through a lot of different people, how flat and low his backhand stays. There's your Ofner-Vukic minute that I know you're waiting for, DK, and that's why you showed up here today. But again,
it was Zhang Zhizhen, by the way, that he lost to.
Oh, in 3 sets. Thank you.
Yes.
Who made semifinals that week in Halle, so not a bad loss there. But like, if I am Alcaraz, to have Baez, Tiafoe, Navone, and Casper Ruud as 4 of the other 7 seeds in my section, I'm just looking up at the stars and saying thank you for that. Now, again, Sasha Bublik is another seed in this section. He's top 10 in grass court specific ELO ratings. He has been awful at the majors this year. And again, you just will never have Bublik on a serious list as a threat until he shows it that he wants to take this game. See, he could lose round 1 to Jakub Menchik. You have Ugo Humbert, lefty on paper, should be pretty good on this surface. He's made the second week before. He just has not played well over the course of the last month. The big name is Tommy Paul. And that's the one that are in opposite halves of this section. Like, all due respect to some of the fun first round matches, all due respect to some of the fun young names in this section. Again, you have a Jakub Menchik, you have an Arthur Cazot, you have a rising Zizou Bergs, Brandon Nakashima's played really good ball. Of every quarter of the draw, all 8 of them, men's and women's side, to me, this feels like the no-brainer Carlos versus Tommy quarterfinal. Like, I don't even know how much more time we need to spend on that, right?
The tennis world has put its collective hand around the neck of this potential Alcaraz Tommy Paul quarterfinal. We want to see it.
That's so
it is
true.
ours. It belongs to us
and
nobody else.
It's really good. That's so, it's literally like, that's what it is. It's a Targaryen at their prime being like, here's your dragon egg. This is going to be your dragon someday. You're just doing this thing.
We're ready. I'm so ready. My body is ready for this one. I just feel like, we look at that quarter. It's a huge opportunity for Alcaraz to just sort of play his way into the tournament. Yes, he lost to Jack Draper at Queens. Oh, well, he's coming off of having won Roland Garros. He's the defending champion here. I sense that he really figured out some stuff about how to play on grass last year that I anticipate that he'll bring to Wimbledon this year. And then Tommy Paul, we just had the conversation about American tennis and American men's tennis and who's the American number one in men's tennis. Does it even matter anymore? And all of a sudden, what a difference a couple of weeks makes. Tommy Paul wins. Queen's Club is now the U.S. number one, and all of a sudden, U.S. number one starts to have a bit more cachet behind it. I think it's just sort of the collective, enthusiasm for Tommy and his tennis.
And by the way, Fritz winning Eastbourne this week, he takes the position back 2 times this year. Fritz has been usurped as the American number one. That reign was like a Baratheon. We're sticking with Game of Thrones here. Lasted 1 week. Yes. Ben Shelton was the number one American for 1 week. Tommy was the number one American for 1 week. And then Taylor was like, calm the fuck down. Like, it's still my spot.
But I think we all know who the real American number one is. I'm just saying, I got my hand on the neck of it.
Martin Daum is very good. I agree with you. Like, that's probably my number one right now. But no, I didn't mean to cut you off. Like, I agree.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I feel like there's a lot of enthusiasm for Tommy and his tennis, and we certainly have seen a really interesting rivalry develop between Alcaraz and Paul. So it's sort of like the best of all possible worlds converging into that quarterfinal, because we unfortunately don't have a ton of hope in Casper Ruud's chances of making it deep at Wimbledon. I just think there are just, unlike a lot of the other clay court players who have translated their games to grass, there's just some real structural technical issues that really limit Casper and his forehand on the surface that just, the ball just sits up. It's not even like, it's one of those things where you feel like going in, but he plays so well everywhere else. What difference does it make? And you just see a couple points of him trying to play on grass, and it just blunts everything that makes his game great on other surfaces, certainly slower surfaces. A big opportunity for him. I would be certainly curious to see really any of Bublik's matches against Menchik, potentially against Zizou Bergs, against the Tommy Paul in the third round. But I don't know if that necessarily carries the sort of cachet for Bublik to really rise to the occasion. Certainly would love to be proven wrong, because he feels like, now, if not now, when. But yeah, that Alcaraz Paul quarterfinal was probably the thing I was most confident in when making both draw predictions. Yeah.
Now, a guy I'm watching closely in this section, Francis Tiafoe, like he could lose his first round match against Matteo Arnaldi.
Are you watching through like?
Yeah, because because it's like it's got to get going. Again, he's hovering around 500 for the year. He's in jeopardy of dropping out of the top 32, not being seated at the U.S. Open, where obviously he has had his most success. I think he's one to watch. Is Brandon Nakashima, not uppercase letters, but is Brandon Nakashima back if he beats Sebi Baez here? Like, is he back in the ethos of the conversation? Like, oh yeah, this is a prospect who should be good for a while, because he fell out of the top 100, but built his way back through challenger success, like has made a third round here, played Kyrgios close all those years before, fourth round, excuse me. Like, he could make a fourth round here this week. And again, like kind of slowly work his way back into that interesting player conversation.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like I haven't seen or heard from Nakashima since that match against Kyrgios Wimbledon. Certainly played well through the rest of that season, but has been pretty absent in the years since.
Well, had to go to the challenger level to build things back. Did make a semifinal in Stuttgart a couple of weeks ago, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, where it matters, he's been absent. where people are watching, he was not there, and now he's back, which is great. And that's an opportunity. And then it's a great advertisement for the challenger level to say, look, I was able to reel back, play, rebuild my ranking, and here I am contending for a potential Wimbledon fourth round, according to the Crack Rackets podcast. So there you have it.
I would also say Jakub Menchik's interesting to me. Like, I don't know if it's yet, but a Menchik Tommy Paul third round should be your worst nightmare, DK, because Menchik just has weapons. His forehand's a little big, and it will miss on this surface right now, but he is going to be good at this surface with his attacking profile moving forward. That section is fascinating. Bublik, Menchik, Bergs, Cazot, like that is for the hipsters. That section is for us still. We agree. Tommy versus Alcaraz. And again, that's a 2-2 career head-to-head. Hopefully we get that matchup as a quarterfinal. Let's move to the bottom half of the draw. This is the section where you could get weird with your predictions. No doubt about it. The Alex Zverev section of the draw. Again, Zverev significantly lesser results at Wimbledon than every other major in his career. That said, the number 4 seed dealt 6th seeded Andrei Rublev in his section as a way of saying, well, here's another uncertainty to headline here in this Zverev quarter of the draw. Now, your other seeds, some of them have played very well. Like, here's what they said. They said, all right, we're going to give you the worst top tier seeds, and then we're going to load the rest of the section. Listen to this list, DK. Jack Draper, he won a title over these last 3 weeks. Taylor Fritz, he just won in Eastbourne. Alejandro Tabilo, he just won in Mallorca. Sebi Korda, he was the story of the first 2 weeks. He beats Tommy Paul. He has another big run the next week at Queen's Club. Again, beats Dimitrov there, excuse me. That's the other name. Lorenzo Musetti has played awesome for the last month. You know, again, it's real. Alejandro Tabilo, like all these names. The only ones we aren't saying there are the top 3, Zverev, Rublev, and Tsitsipas, who they kind of all grouped into this section, but they said, oh, we're not going to make life easy for you. We're going to give you the best of the rest. This, to me, is the Sabalenka section of the, or not the Sabalenka section, excuse me, maybe the Rybakina section. Just like, this one's loaded. This one's awesome. This one has so much talent, or the Gauff section, whichever you want to pick. There's a lot of talent everywhere. I love this section. I think this one gets weird. What's your read?
Let me just pick my one of my AirPods battery died. So
oh
we'll see
no!
how long the other one holds up.
Yeah, we'll see if this show can roll through.
But yeah, this is the one where, you know, it's very ATP, where like the seeds all hold. It's sort of like the perfect moment for there to be a surprise semifinalist. And it's just sort of that kind of controlled chaos that I think you want if you're a top tier sporting organization. And there goes the second one. So just pause for. Okay, can you hear me? Everything's all good? Okay.
I can hear you.
Yeah, the one player that I really wish I had paid a bit more attention to in this section was Musetti, because I feel like he really is trending up and is someone who's very talented on the surface. Again, that clay to grass transition game, we're starting to see more and more. I put all my chips on Sebi Korda. It just feels like a really, again, really going big on the American men's tennis. It feels like this is a huge opportunity for him. You know, he's not going to have to play a particularly confident grass court seed in his third round in a Stefanos Tsitsipas. You even look at a Musetti against Rublev. I mean, a Musetti Korda fourth round would be a pretty intriguing next generation kind of clash, and the winner of that potentially making the semis even. And then obviously you look at Jack Draper, you know, another one that you couldn't have scripted it better, the way that he played a couple weeks ago on grass to now coming into this section of Wimbledon where it feels like a really big opportunity for him to make it deep. I looked at Korda and I looked at Draper. Those are really my two top picks out of this quarter.
They're great picks and they're bold picks. Again, you could make the case for every seed that isn't one of the top 3 seeds, because obviously they have all struggled more of late than every player who I already went through all those cases. Korda Davidovich Fokina is a fascinating first round match because it feels like Alejandro Davidovich Fokina is built to come out and beat a Sebastian Korda in this matchup. Like, after all of his struggles, this is the one he wins, and now all of a sudden we have to all buy back in again. That's my favorite first round matchup, but like, you're absolutely right. Like, Jack Draper has played better grass court tennis than Sasha Zverev so far this year. Sebi Korda has played better grass court tennis than Stefanos Tsitsipas this year. Lorenzo Musetti has played just better tennis, but grass court as well, in particular, than Andrei Rublev so far this year. Fritz and Tabilo are even. They both won titles this week. Eastbourne, Mallorca. Like, you could make the case for either. Obviously, some interesting non-seeds in this section as well. But for me, this section's all about the seeds, because you have a lot of really good tennis players, 8 of them, all in this section of the draw. And again, it's the lowest ranked 5 that come in with the most form. They're all going to have to beat each other up as well. And look, it is really hard for me to make a prediction in this section. I could make a case for every guy. I ultimately went really boring. He's holding over 90% of the time. Like, I just don't know if Draper has the juice to knock him off. And I think if he gets through that, I also think he matches. Well, here's the thing. It's the leftiness. It's like, you don't want to throw lefties at Zverev because that backhand return holds up well. And I just think Zverev is going to be there to take away that slice wide for Draper, take away that slice wide for a Tabilo. It's a bad matchup for Fritz as well. I just think Zverev's a little bit better at everything. He's never made a semifinal at the majors this year, but he's been the second best player at the first 2 majors of the season. I went really boring. I went Zverev over Korda to come out of the top half. I, like you, am doubling down on every Korda take I've offered. I had him to finish the year as the #1 ranked American. So this is just an extension of that from last December. If he's going to do that, it has to be a big run here. I'm taking Korda, but man, is this section loaded. This one's going to get fun.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that they're both the odds-on favorites to make the third round, that Draper Zverev, and I think that the winner of that will probably go very deep. But I just feel like the way that Draper's playing, that sort of British momentum that is really just going to lift him in a way that it did for Andy Murray, but I feel like for Jack Draper, it's going to be a totally different situation, or certainly a more extreme situation. He is very much, in every sense of the word, a hometown favorite. There's no Brit Scott dichotomy that Andy Murray had to deal with quite unfairly, I should clarify, throughout the early stages of his career. This is just a made to order champion from Great Britain, and I think that that's really going to. I mean, the way that he played against Alcaraz at Queen's Club, was not afraid of the moment, was not afraid of the big stage, and certainly Alcaraz certainly much mentally tougher than an Alexander Zverev in big matches. I just think and I feel like we are due for a blip from Zverev. He's just been so consistent.
He also, Jack Draper gave the quote of, "I like the cameras. Like, I like the attention. You're going to get it at Wimbledon, my friend."
Yeah, I mean, he is built for this occasion. He's been primed and prepped, and
it's the right pick.
Back it up.
Yeah, I'm jealous that you made the pick. I wish I had the confidence in my convictions to have made it. I just think it's a matchup thing. Like, I just think it's the backhand wide. Like, Draper wants to hit that slice wide ad side return serve so badly, and Zverev will be there to take it away. I also just think Zverev serve, like, Draper's not going to have those opportunities to take those big cuts on the forehand high returns that sit up that he just slaps through. Draper is the fun pick. It's the pick I should have made. I went with Zverev over Korda. I think, again, Tabilo and Fritz are playing really well. Don't write them off of advancing out of the bottom half as well. Both have the things you need, the serves, to make life easy for themselves. This is the quarter where I have the most uncertainty. The Djokovic quarter, much like quarter number 2, I think ends up with the 2 top seeds. Like, all due respect to the other 6 seeds in this section: Cerundolo, Felix, even de Minaur, Rune, Khachanov, Etcheverry. Djokovic and Hurkacz are number 3 and 4 in my top 10 contenders list, DK. Hurkacz is number 3 in hold percentage on the ATP Tour this season. Novak's made 5 straight Wimbledon finals. That's the longest consecutive streak of finals for him at any major over any time span in his career. Like, I get he's injured, but if he's in the draw, especially this draw, the institutional know-how, I'm pretty certain. And by the way, there are fun storylines in here. Andy Murray in this section versus Mahatch. Will he be healthy enough to play? Like, again, the Alex de Minaur of it all feels like things have opened up for him to make another deep run at a major. I'm just very much in it ends up Djokovic Hurkacz camp. What say you?
Yeah, I do think that the de Minaur Hurkacz 4th round will be very instructive for how that section of the draw turns out. I think if it's a de Minaur Djokovic quarter, I think Djokovic makes it through. And what a twist, what a way that things have turned for Djokovic, from everyone sort of just assuming he wouldn't play Wimbledon to suddenly looking at his draw and thinking he's got as good a shot as anybody to make the final, if not better than most players, just, again, given his experience here, his comfort on the surface, the way that he knows how to play on grass better than the cumulative experience of the field. I don't even think matches up to what Djokovic has been able to accomplish at Wimbledon over the last decade. Plus, certainly has the first week draw to play his way into form. He's not going to really get super duper tested on a slippery grass surface. It's just going to be all about his body and how well it's holding up. Because I don't really think that he is going to be up against opposition that's going to put him in uncomfortable positions as well, whether he will be able to adapt to the movement quickly enough, under high pressure in best of 5. But that said, I feel very confident in the fact that he can make it to the second week. I think the big test will be Hubert Hurkacz, who you feel like, Hubie caught some strays last week about his inability to perform at slams. And I was like, well, that's not necessarily true. I just feel like he's performed well at some slams. He's
gone quarters in round of 16 this year. Like, he's been pretty good.
He's not never performed well at slams. He has just never lived up to, I think, the expectations that people have developed of him over the last couple of years. I think people have thought that by now he should have made a slam final. He certainly should have made more slam semis. That was a weird way to end at Roland Garros, kind of like in a haze, looking to advocate for the replacement of your chair umpire. It's like, girl, focus on the match. But that said, we saw what Hubie was able to do against Roger a couple of years ago. An undercooked Federer. How will he fare against an undercooked Djokovic in the quarterfinals? He will certainly be the biggest test that Djokovic will have faced up to the quarterfinals, even against a Holger Rune, who I don't feel tremendously confident in, much to my disappointment and chagrin. It would have been a big opportunity for Holger if he was playing better. I don't think that's going to happen. But so then you forecast that potential quarterfinal between Hubie and Djokovic. Maybe things get a bit more tricky for Novak, who then will he be giving everything, with the Olympics on the line? Is he going to risk his body the way that he has in the past when the Olympics is coming up? That's the big question for him, because I think the last thing he would want is to not play the Olympics for any reason. Yeah. And so as much as I'm sure he's going to give 110% and is not going to give up, that extra little effort, that extra little bit that he's going to throw himself into this court, and potentially further injure himself or, re-injure himself and not be able to play the Olympics. I don't know if that's a risk that necessarily he's willing to take with that, the last bit of history on the line for him. So that's a really interesting quarterfinal. And if Hubie wins it, really interesting way for that tournament to finish. And then if Djokovic wins it, then I kind of think there's no stopping him from making the final.
To the Djokovic side of things, it's a really nice draw for him in week number 1 to work his way through. Again, Popyrin's got weapons. I will ride with TCU All-American Jake Fernley always. Etcheverry solid off both wings. Sure, Nardi already beat Djokovic this season, but it's a grass court. It's not any other surface. You feel like he gets to week 2 pretty comfortably. Again, Hurkacz has the profile of the players who make runs here. You think about Kyrgios 22 final, Berrettini 21 final, Kevin Anderson, Sam Querrey, the success they had in the 2010s. You want to go before that to the Goran Ivanisevic or Richard Krajicek runs of the world? Sure, you can. Feels like this would be an opportunity. Does feel like this would be the window for Hubie Hurkacz to earn that sort of signature run. But Hubie Hurkacz leads the league. Total victories against opponents ranked outside the top 20 this year. He's 30-4 overall against opponents ranked outside the top 20. 3-9 against top 20 opponents so far this season. He's been more consistent against players he should beat than ever before. Does he have the juice to beat a Novak Djokovic, who I agree with you, I think gets to the second week, and then once he's there, he's played his way into at least some form of shape. Like, I'm just not going to pick against Novak Djokovic, and if he's in the draw. I'm not ready to do it till he has 3 consecutive seasons like the one he's had so far here in 2024. That said, DK, as we look to wrap today's show, quarterfinal predictions offer. You have Sinner, Dimitrov, Alcaraz, Tommy Paul, Quarter versus Draper, which sign me up for that. Those are my 9 and 10 in my power rankings. Hurkacz versus Djokovic. Talk me through why your semifinals look the way they do.
Yeah, so as we said, you picked Djokovic. You can't pick against Djokovic. I did pick against Djokovic, and it was a last-minute decision. My first instinct, and it might be the right one, was to go for Djokovic over Hurkacz, but I felt like, again, that's a big challenge and a big rise in level from what will be his first week into the quarterfinals against Hurkacz. How will he adapt to that, and how will he respond to that pressure? Obviously, I feel like Sinner and Alcaraz, we're going to get another really great semifinal from them, barring an inspired performance from a Tommy Paul. I think it's going to be another great building block in that rivalry between Sinner and Alcaraz. And then obviously, I feel like that's a big moment for Jack Draper to just put his stamp on this ascent and really just capitalize on what's going to be a really, really great breakout year for him. So those are my semifinalists. And then I do think that Sinner gets the better of Carlos this time. I feel like it's a long time coming. I feel like if not now, when? I feel like we saw, Sinner get the better. We've seen Sinner get the better of Carlos at times, but I feel like this is the moment where we're going to get it at a slam, at a slam where it matters. Because he did it obviously at Wimbledon a couple of years ago, and I do think that perhaps a bit more grass court know-how from Sinner than in Alcaraz, even though he is the defending champion. I feel like perhaps Sinner's a bit more of a natural fit on the surface, and I think this is we're bringing it all the way back to the Miami Open final, that breakout final between Sinner and Hubie, where I feel like this is the moment now. If not now, when for Hubie? This is his moment to make a Grand Slam final. He won't have to have beaten too many top players to do it. Like that signature win over Djokovic, and then potentially get a Jack Draper who's going to be under a lot of stress and pressure in his first Grand Slam semifinal at home, and then bringing it back to a Jannik Sinner second slam of the season, holding it down for that next generation. I feel like this is a really great moment for him, and we'll see what happens.
The Draper scenario is fascinating. It would be the most fun scenario because certainly to get the crowd engagement, to get the buzz that would come with anyone having that sort of run on home surface, to hear the names Murray and Perry and all the names you hear brought up whenever that sort of thing happens. Yeah, that would be an extraordinary run. And I do think Jack Draper will have that sort of run in his career at some point.
I wouldn't
not.
say
Yeah, no, I love it. I have no problem with that. I'm not quite there yet. Again, we have some similar quarterfinalists, some similar semifinals as well. I have Sinner. We know what that matchup looks like against Medvedev. Alcaraz, I just think his weapons on this surface, I just think it overwhelms the Tommy forehand. I think Tommy's better equipped to deal with everything Alcaraz throws at him on a hard court where he does have a little bit more time, where it is a little bit easier to recover, where he can extend points a little bit more easily. I went Zverev over Korda just because we haven't seen Korda in many quarterfinals yet. And again, the scenario where he gets to the quarterfinals here, pretty tough pathway to do so. If Djokovic gets to the quarterfinals, I just am assuming he's going to be healthy. And at that point, again, he's just too consistent on the return of serve, too diligent with his spots. I think he'll find a way to get past that Hurkacz hurdle. Obviously, semifinals would be fascinating if it is an all top 4 feature. I went a different pathway than you, David Kane. Ultimately, for my men's final, I went Alcaraz Djokovic because I still think the attacking tennis Carlos Alcaraz plays, and look, he's only played 2 matches on a grass court this year, but his serve, his forehand, his drop shots, the angles, I just think he can attack you in more ways on this surface than Sinner can. I do think Sinner's a little bit more consistent with his return, but I just think 3 out of 5 set, the difference between them right now is still that 5% of extra physicality, that extra 5% of gas Alcaraz has left in the tank. I'll take him to advance past Sinner ever so slightly. Again, if Zverev gets to a semifinal, that's a prayer on its own here at Wimbledon. I see no world where he could beat Djokovic in that scenario. I think we get a rematch, and I think we get the same result. Give me Carlos Alcaraz to capture a 2nd straight Wimbledon title, a 2nd consecutive major title on the season, and emerge as your 2024 champion. Those are my thoughts on the draw, DK. That's everything I got. You got any more thoughts before we wrap today's show?
I'm just intrigued by the pick. I kind of thought you were going to pick Djokovic to bring it all the way home. And I was going to ask you where that would rank in terms of all-time comebacks or the story. Because I do think if he goes from the year that he's had to almost not even playing Wimbledon at all, to winning the title over Alcaraz in the final, that may be his crowning achievement. I think that would just be such a tremendous result for him at his age, at this stage of his career, without any momentum and a pretty serious seeming injury coming into it.
It feels like he's also kind of the LeBron James of this discussion, where you could see him, and I'm not going to go too basketball deep on you, I promise, but like, couldn't you also see the world where it's not this event, but it's like, look, I got closer at Wimbledon, but then after the year I had, I finaled Wimbledon, but then I got over that final hurdle and I won the Olympics. Like, I just think, again, this is the ramp up stage to that event, which is the piece de resistance. That's everything for Novak here in 2024. Again, I'll let Pavi G do the prognosticating on where it ranks in the all-time Novak accomplishments because he knows them better than I do.
We'll let him shoot the missile.
Yeah, I assume he's been watching the whole time, waiting for that. Yeah, I think Alcaraz, his weapons on this serve, like, can you imagine dealing with the weight of his forehand and knowing, like, but at any time he could hit a drop shot. Like, all he has to do is make the drop shot on this surface and it's effective. Yeah, I think Alcaraz Swiatek to sweep the Channel Slams. I'm going to stick with it. I don't feel horrible there. That said, again, that's an hour 45 of everything on the men's and women's singles draws. Obviously, DK, I know you and the tennis.com team going to be amping up all of your coverage over the course of the next 2 weeks. What can we expect from you? Any final things to plug before we wrap today's show?
Well, we'll have Joel Drucker and Robbie Uva on site at Wimbledon. So we'll get some live on the spot coverage on tennis.com. And yeah, we're just going to be hitting away for the next couple of weeks at Wimbledon, just covering everything there is to cover. There's a lot of intriguing opening round matches. There's going to be a lot of, beat reporting and just everything you can expect, from tennis to the match reports, to the feature stories, to the fashion, to the social reports, all tennis.com, all baseline, all the time.
I love to hear it. We look forward to reading it all. And again, I look forward to having you on the show as well to help break down everything that unfolds over the course of the next 2 weeks. That said, that'll do it for today's show. We appreciate all of you who who joined us for our live conversation. This is something we plan to do more of throughout the course of the summer and moving forward. Hopefully you all will hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any more of our content moving forward. Of course, a thank you as always to our super producer, Daniel Westoff, as well. Does just what sort of job, DK, day in, day out?
He does a fuck of an editing job.
Day in, day
I
out.
should have done like the British equivalent to a crack up job, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Just makes it all possible. Thank you to him for all the graphics you saw today. Again, a thank you to all of you who tuned in as well. With that said, though, for my fantastic co-host, David Kane, our super producer, Daniel Westoff, and all of us here at both Cracked Racquets and the Tennis Channel Podcast Network, I'm your host, Alex Gruskin. DK, what do we tell our listeners?
And that's the break.
And we will see you all for the start of Wimbledon. Thanks, everyone.
Cheerio.